Hello and welcome back to another episode of Halftime on the Hudson. I'm Robert DeFelice, and with me today is the beautiful, the talented, the funny Nicholas Vete. How you doing today, Nick?
I'm doing well, Rob. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. Let's get right into some news and some hot takes. One of the biggest events in college sports is gearing up for their start. March Madness is scheduled to begin March 13th, and the brackets are far from set. Unlike most years in college basketball, there are no clear, dominant, unstoppable forces. Every team appears to be beatable. Gonzaga, Auburn, Arizona, and Kansas are likely to take the #1 seeds, with teams like Duke, Purdue hot on their trail. Every one of these teams has lost at least 2 games in the regular season. With that being said, Nick, who do you like? Who do you not like? Where do you think it's going to go?
Well, I'll tell you who I do like, and it's interesting because, you brought up the point just before about how there's no clear dominant teams, and while I do agree with that from a standpoint because, I think last year we saw Gonzaga just run through the regular season, dominating, going into the tournament, playing so well. Ultimately they lost in the final, but they were the clear-cut #1 team going into the tournament. And, I think this year, Gonzaga, we're seeing that again. They've lost games this season, but they're still playing very well. One team that I really like, who I don't think is getting talked about quite as much, even though they're still up there in the top 25, is Duke. They've been playing really well of late, too. They just won today against Virginia, avenging their loss that happened recently against Virginia as well. And they haven't, outside of that Virginia game, the first one that they lost, they haven't lost any other game this month. So they're a team that's playing well. Paolo Banchero is their star there, who's been leading them as well. And I think that they're a team that's poised to make a deep run, as Duke has been known to do in the past. And, Mike Krzyzewski's last year, I'd be lying if I say it wouldn't be nice to see them make a deep run again. So who do you like in this year's tournament?
I got to go with the team led by the 7-foot stud of Chet Holmgren, averaging 22 points per game as a true freshman. I watched him back when he was back in prep school, and he was a dominant force from there. I thought he was a little, skinny, and didn't know if he'd be able to compete at a higher level quite yet, but he has shown that I was totally wrong. He has just been an absolute dominant force on the court, getting rebounds. He's leading his team in rebounds. He's been absolutely unstoppable, and with a guy like that that's so hard to guard for other teams and hard to get rebounds over top of him, I'd love to see what Gonzaga can do. They made it to the finals last year, came up short. I think they got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and they're going to take that run pretty deep. And teams like Auburn, I liked Auburn for a majority of the regular season, but they just dropped 2 straight. They lost to unranked Florida. It's hard to see a loss like that and to see, you're going to have to play a bunch of games in the tournament. If you're going to come up short in a game like that, what makes you think you're going to be able to go all the way in the tournament? So I'm gonna stick with Gonzaga.
Yeah, I think a lot of this too is just speculation at this point because we still do have conference tournaments that we have to play through. But I think you're starting to kind of see the picture come together a little bit of who the teams are. I'm also a big fan of some of the teams in the Big East. Providence is playing right now as we speak. I think Villanova, with Colin Gillespie healthy this season, unlike he was in last year's tournament, I think they're a team that you have to watch out for. And UConn is also playing really well. They're a gritty team that I think could also potentially make a run. So the Big East is another conference that I'm looking at. But time will tell as we see these conference tournaments play out who some of those top teams in the tournament are going to be.
Absolutely.
With that, we'll move on to our next topic, and it has to do with Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers. In his weekly segment on the Pat McAfee Show this past Tuesday, Rodgers said that he went through a 12-day cleanse and came out feeling intense gratitude for the people in his life. Rodgers also referenced that he has not yet made up his mind about his NFL future. Rob, there's a lot going on with Aaron Rodgers right now. What do you see going on here?
First of all, I don't know if we're allowed to say it here, but the details of that cleanse were beyond disgusting. So if you want to know more about that, look it up. I'm not going to kind of jump into it at all. But he then went on to post on social media this huge post about gratitude and his girlfriend and everything that went down there, and then the Packers and his teammates and the fans and football. And it seemed like a little bit of a cryptic message, possible hint at retirement, at least a possible hint at leading the Packers. Obviously, we know hasn't been happy there for a long time, kind of wants to get out of there. As a Broncos fan, drama aside, I'd still like to see him under center for the Broncos. I think, with the hiring of their offensive coordinator coming to Denver.
Nathaniel Hackett, yeah.
Yep, could play a huge role into bringing him over, and then with that could bring Davante Adams as well. It's kind of far-fetched, but not impossible. I'd love to see it happen, but it's clear that Aaron Rodgers definitely has a ton of off-field things that he needs to figure out and sort out before he's ready to strap up the helmet again.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting way you put it, that he has like a lot of off-the-field stuff that he's got to figure out, because I think by Aaron Rodgers doing a lot of this stuff, he's a smart guy, and he may say, oh, I went on this cleanse, I have such a new perspective on things, but everything that he does, I think, is choreographed in some plan, in some sort of way. And I think by him kind of doing this, it was referenced on, Colin Cowherd said it on his show today on Fox Sports, is that maybe it's a little bit of him, talking about this, talking about gratitude for everything, thanking everybody. Like you referenced, it kind of sounds like he's thinking about the next chapter of his life, whatever it's going to be, in football, whatever team it's going to be. So I think maybe he's testing the water a little bit, maybe seeing what's the reaction to me kind of being thankful for my past, being thankful in Green Bay. And if I were to kind of go on to that next step with a different organization, what's kind of the play that it's going to get on social media? What's the kind of reaction it's going to get from the fans? So I think we could be seeing that a little bit. But still no official decision's been made.
Yeah.
So, if you had to say at this point, what do you think that next step is going to be for Rodgers? You're a Broncos fan. You want to see him in Denver?
I'd like to see him. He'd definitely be an upgrade from Teddy Bridgewater, but if you ask me right now, you're Aaron Rodgers, what's the decision? I'd probably say he's going to leave and he's going to, pursue a career in media and test the waters there. I think this is very uncharted territory for Rodgers. For a majority of his career, he was rather quiet. He'd step on the field, he'd dominate, and he would step off the field. And that was pretty much all you heard from him. But in the last 2 years, it's been nonstop drama of all of the things going on, whether it was with, not wanting to play in Green Bay, whether it was the vaccine situation. There was just so much going on with Rodgers this year and kind of the offseason this past season as well. So it's a very strange side of Rodgers that we're starting to get used to. But it's done a new normal, so it's unpredictable.
So you think that his next step is going to be retirement?
I think so.
It's no more NFL for Aaron Rodgers.
I think he's gotten to a point where he's done with the malarkey, and he's ready to move on to something where he can make more money, take less damage to his body, and enjoy himself a little bit more. And the only thing I could see that would go against it is his ego. He doesn't want his retirement to be overshadowed by Tom Brady's retirement. So, this was Tom Brady and Big Ben's season to retire, and that if he announced his retirement now, it's not going to get as much hype perhaps as if he did it next season. So I see it as a possibility of him to stroke his ego, play one more season, get a farewell tour on his way out, and that'll be it.
See, I get what you're saying, and I think that the kind of working somehow around the NFL, whether it's a job like that or he's done the Jeopardy stuff before, I think eventually that's in his path down the road. I have to disagree with you because I do think that this season, and possibly even beyond, he's going to be playing in the NFL. I personally think at this point, things are kind of pointing towards him getting out of Green Bay, while I still think that's arguably the best situation for him. And people have talked about what is the best situation for Aaron Rodgers. I don't believe that going to Denver is his best situation. People have said, oh, the offensive coordinator's there. Oh, they've got a team that's, ready to win the Super Bowl. But when you look at that division with the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes and the Chargers and Justin Herbert on the rise, and Derek Carr, who's one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the NFL, and a Raiders team that just made the playoffs, that's a division that if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I don't want to go to. I don't want to touch the Broncos. I'm looking at either staying in Green Bay or maybe going somewhere like Tom Brady, you just referenced him retiring. Head down to Tampa Bay and see if you can win a couple Super Bowls down there before you call it quits and go on to Jeopardy or working in the NFL behind, in a camera position or anything like that.
Yeah, and putting my bias aside as a Broncos fan, I think you're right. The one point for that, though, I'd say is, when he came into the NFL and he took over the reins as the starting quarterback for Green Bay, a team like Chicago wasn't horrible, right? A team like Minnesota definitely wasn't bad at that time, but he was able to come in, dominate, beat them down, and continue to, as he said, own them throughout the years. So a team that's really not that good of the Raiders, especially, the new head coach could turn things around with McDaniels and all of that. We'll see. But, I think he could come in and it might excite him for the challenge.
Yeah, it could excite him for the challenge, but I think if he's trying to win a Super Bowl, head down to Tampa Bay. You've got the weapons. He could join pretty much any team in the NFC South, and they're going to become the best team the moment he joins that roster. So, to go to a division like that or to stay in the NFC North where they're already clearly the best team, I don't see what the point is to going to then having to dogfight season in, season out in a division like the AFC West with so many talented young quarterbacks and good rosters being assembled.
Interesting. Time will tell. Also, you look at a team like Seattle where is Russ going to be there next year? And if Russ leaves, could Aaron Rodgers go in there? Pete Carroll, Aaron Rodgers.
Again, that's also another tough division, but
Could be interesting. Even if Pete Carroll stays, who knows? Kemba Walker was recently announced that he'll be sitting the rest of the year. According to Adrian Woj, Kemba and the Knicks have mutually agreed for the former All-Star guard to sit for the rest of the season. Knicks president of basketball operations Leon Rose said that the team fully supports Kemba's decision to shut it down for the remainder of the season and use this time to prepare for next season. Kemba is in one of the first of a 2-year contract he signed with the Knicks last offseason. Nick, there's a lot to unpack here. You know, it doesn't seem like it's something that's normal for a player to do. It's kind of a little shocking, but also at the same time, not really, especially with everything that's been going on. So what's your take here? Who do you think's in the right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is like a lot of layers to it, and I haven't seen exactly or heard anything of what the main reason is for this decision. Obviously, Kemba missed a lot of time due to injury this season, and hasn't been playing back-to-backs since he came back from that injury. So that's something he's been dealing with. And then you also look at the fact of where the Knicks are, and Kemba Walker has been playing great. His past 7 games, he's been averaging 8 points per game, 2 rebounds per game, and 4 assists per game. So not great, stats that we've seen from the former All-Star before. This definitely isn't, some of the best basketball he's ever played. And I think when you look at how much the Knicks are struggling, this is something that, while I know Tom Thibodeau has his rotation set in his mind of what he wants, I think the opportunity now for Kemba to sit. And, this is a polite way of putting it. If it was the Knicks that wanted him to sit, this is the good way of saying, hey, this was in the best interest of everybody. Kemba's going to sit. He's dealing with some stuff. We're going to get him ready for next season, knowing he's on an expiring contract. But if he's actually hurt, best of luck to him. Hopefully he can get healthy and, can make something out of next season. But overall for the Knicks, I think this is beneficial because where they're sitting right now, 12th, they're out of the play-in tournament. If they can free up that, well, the rotation spot is freed up. Derrick Rose is going to be coming back from injury soon. You've also got Emmanuel Quickley and Miles McBride, 2 young point guards who are also going to get more minutes from this. I think it's a great opportunity to, 1, get some young, fresh players in there who can possibly provide more of a spark if you give them more minutes. Or if the Knicks are going to continue to struggle, at least you're getting the opportunity for that young talent to develop, which is going to be more beneficial for the team long term than having Kemba in there anyway.
I agree. And I think, too, I'd be interested to read as more of this story unfolds and we find out more information. But I read one speculation that talked that this might not only be for his physical health, but also his mental, which honestly, I think that would be a great move. I think in the current world of sports, that's becoming more accepted. That's becoming more discussed. And it becomes more beneficial for the athletes. We look at Simone Biles in the Olympics and the step back that she had to take for her own mental health. And, the first backlash that she got initially, but then kind of dialed it back. You look at someone like Ben Simmons who didn't handle the situation as best as you possibly could. But the fact that mental health of the athletes is starting to be talked about and they're given certain accommodations to help them progress through that rather than, shut up and dribble the basketball type of situation. So I definitely want to see more that comes out from it, but I think you're right. It's a good opportunity for the Knicks to test out young talent, have someone like Derrick Rose be a veteran presence, lead them. Playoffs don't seem to be in the cards for them. Not totally out yet, but don't seem to be in the cards. So I think it's definitely the good move for both parties.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, it's I think along that lines that would make more sense because you said before what Leon Rose, like the Knicks support what he's doing, so it makes it seem like it was Kemba's decision more than anything. And if he's dealing with mental and physical health issues, then like I said, best of luck to him. I hope that everything can work out. But it also makes sense because, like I said, Tom Thibodeau isn't really the type of guy to switch up the rotation. I mean, heck, it took him weeks just to get Cam Reddish into the rotation, and they gave up a first-round pick for him. So, I don't think it was a decision that was made purely based on the rotation, but Derrick Rose is coming back, so he should be able to slot in there quite well. And then hopefully more minutes for Miles McBride and Emmanuel Quickley.
Absolutely. We'll just have to wait and see how the rest of the season unfolds for the Knicks.
Yeah, certainly have plenty of ground to make up. Zion Williamson. He was criticized by former teammate on the Pelicans, J.J. Redick, earlier this week for what Redick described as being a detached teammate and for not being fully invested in his body, work, and other teammates. A lot of criticism on Zion. He hasn't played this season, a game this season due to a foot injury, and he's been recovering from, and there's still no clear timetable for his return. So Zion hasn't played at all. He's getting criticized by former teammate J.J. Redick. What do you make of all this? You know, what's up here with Zion?
Honestly, I think it's been a tragedy of his career so far. You know, back when he was at Duke, he received so much hype. He was this ginormous monster that was a dominant force on the court. Goes to the Pelicans. You know, he got injured in the tournament when his shoe busted open right before he got to the Pelicans. And it's just been injury after injury. And I don't think he's played more than like 50 games in his entire career so far.
Yeah.
And so I think J.J. Redick's right. You know, we both have played team sports in our lives. We know that it's very important to buy into it or to just get out, because the team can't operate, whether it's at a youth level or professional level. It cannot operate unless the whole team is buying into what you're trying to work on. The criticism from Redick directly, I get it. But of all people, when there's someone like Ben Simmons or James Harden, to go after Zion that hard and make it seem like this is a first time ever heard situation, no one's ever done this to their team, I think he took it a little, exaggerated a little bit more. Zion's been rather quiet. He made an appearance at a game a little while ago, and a lot of the internet blew up about what was going on with his weight. A ton of people gave him a ton of slack, saying he's gained a ton of weight, he's not taking care of himself, is he ever going to return? There was a whole bunch of questions that go unanswered, and I hope he recovers. I hope he gets himself back in shape and we see him back on the court again, but right now it doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing with this is you have to figure out what's the root of this, because, all right, the injury is one thing. You know, if a player's injured, he's got to deal with it. He's got to get healthy. But you can only heal from an injury so fast, and if you continually get more and more hurt, that's one thing. But when you go back to the root of this J.J. Redick comment, where he said he was a bad teammate, a disconnected teammate, wasn't keeping his body in shape, all this stuff, it also goes back to the root of, well, why was J.J. Redick saying this in the first place? And the reason that he brought this up is because supposedly Zion Williamson hadn't made contact with C.J. McCollum, who they just traded for. Now, supposedly that's been, since proven to be false, but when you look at it in this standpoint, well, if Zion Williamson is even being questioned as a bad teammate or a disconnected teammate, does that bring up the question that he wants out? And if he wants out, then I raise the question, what's the reason that he wants out? Because I get New Orleans has been bad in a lot lately, but you just traded for C.J. McCollum, who's one of the most underrated players in the NBA. You have Brandon Ingram, who's developed into a player that easily averages 20 points a game per season now. And, it's a team that's got young talent. Herb Jones is in there. Kira Lewis Jr., the young point guard, he's injured right now, but he's there as well. So there's potential for that to be for the New Orleans to develop, but when Zion Williamson isn't on the court and he's not keeping his body in shape and he's continually getting hurt, there's nothing that can come of that. So I feel like some of this blame either has to go on Zion directly for not being able to get on the court and stay on the court, or the question needs to be, does he just not want to be there? And if he doesn't want to be there, again, I question why. Because I brought up everything about the players, and if it comes to his brand, because Zion Williamson was obviously a huge figure at Duke, but you can't tell me that you can't build a brand in a small market. We've seen players do it before. Giannis has built a brand in Milwaukee. Damian Lillard's built a brand in Portland. Ja Morant right now is building a brand in Memphis. You can build a brand in small markets, but the market size isn't going to matter if you can't get on the court and stay on the court. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. When he came out of college, they make predictions about players. Sometimes they're grossly wrong, but I heard numerous comparisons calling him the next LeBron James, right? And when you watched him at Duke, it was almost believable.
Especially comparing his athleticism.
Especially his athleticism. It was believable. There were high hopes. He took the court, and we thought he's next type of situation. But since then, it's just been absolutely downhill. And if you're going to continue to complain and to not put in the effort and to not put in the work, then request a trade and get out. You may be unhappy, then do something about it. Don't sit around feeling bad about yourself, not taking care of your body, not doing the things you need to do, because at the end of the day, if you're not going to take care of yourself, if you're not going to get your body ready, not only are the Pelicans not going to want you, but neither is any other team by the time you actually try to get yourself out of there. So you're not helping anyone in this situation. You're not helping your team. You're not helping yourself to try to move to a different team. He's got to figure out what's going on, figure out what he wants, and then move from it.
And you know, the big loser in all of this too is just the Pelicans organization.
Absolutely.
Because one, he's not on the court. Two, if you were to request a trade, you know, there's no leverage for the Pelicans at this point because you know he wants out, you know he's disinterested. Other teams are looking at him saying he's a bad teammate. Who says he's not going to be a bad teammate on our team as well if he doesn't like the culture? And then you also bring up the fact too that he's been injured so much that what team's going to want to give up first-round assets to trade for him? So, and I also want to clarify one thing. If he is injured, and I know he's been injured all season, he's dealing with the foot issues. You know, real injuries is one thing, but like I said, we've seen before, this guy can't get himself in shape. And if you can't get yourself in shape, you're making yourself more susceptible to more injuries, and that I can't forgive. So
and you know, a broken foot. How many athletes have we seen break their foot in the history of athletics? Right? You look at it and you say, okay, it's going to be a 8 to 10 week recovery. 8 to 12 week recovery. Okay, he had a little bit of a setback. It's going to be 4 more weeks. There has been zero timetable for his injury and his recovery. That seems very, very strange to me that there is nothing that's been said of, okay, it's going to be this week's, oh, he actually had a setback, then it's going to extend it by this much. It has just been, we don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I don't want to criticize a player for dealing with injuries and trying to recover from injuries, especially if they take longer. But part of the reason you have setbacks and they take longer, like I said, is just because he hasn't been able to get himself in game shape. And that's unfortunately, I feel, a reason why he continues to get injured over and over again so far throughout his career.
Absolutely, and I think that about wraps things up for our hot takes and news segment here. We're going to toss things over for another segment of Prove Your Point. Stay tuned. Welcome back to another segment of Prove Your Point, the game show where your only task is to prove to me that your side is better. Joining us on the show, two titans of Prove Your Point. On this side, we have Derek, who is 5-0 on the show. And on this side, we have my co-producer, the wonderful Connor, who is 2-0 on the show. We're going to jump right into things, guys. First topic. What team do you think is the sleeper to take the NHL Stanley Cup? Derek, we're going to start with you on this one.
I'm going to go with the Washington Capitals. And right now you look, TJ Oshie, he's on the injured reserve. So you're getting TJ Oshie back. That's a huge lift for the Capitals, which is definitely going to have them improve as well. You obviously got Alex Ovechkin, who's a top 5 player in the NHL. You got players across the board. You got Backstrom as well in that front line. That line for the Capitals, if you're talking playoff time, you got 3 top players that, in my opinion, you're talking about top 15 hockey players. And when you're going up against teams in the playoffs who, they might have more depth than you, but in hockey, it comes to top players making top plays, and those guys are going to get a lot of points. They're going to score a lot of goals for the Capitals. And I honestly think right now they're sitting at that first wild card spot, and they honestly could jump up higher, and I think they will jump up higher to make a run, and I think the Capitals are going to do very well in the postseason, as they've been in the postseason in the past, and I think that experience for the Capitals is going to really help them moving forward in this postseason coming the way in the hockey playoffs.
All right, Connor, we're going to send it right over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think without a doubt, if we're talking sleeper of all sleepers, like, you know, drinking some Sleepy Time tea, which, let me just throw in there, for those of you who don't know, the Sleepy Time tea bear on the little box, he woke up, big news. Anyway, I digress. The Nashville Predators are, in my opinion, the sleepiest of all sleepers, right? They are currently 5th in the Western Conference, 4th in their own division, but they have 62 points this season. They're behind 3 incredible teams right now in their own division. The Colorado Avalanche, the St. Louis Blues, and the Minnesota Wild. Those are all fantastic teams who can get right in there and go for the Stanley Cup. But you just look at the compromise, how their team is composed. I mean, Roman Jody has 53 points. Flip Forsberg, he's got 26 goals in the season. Even Matt Duchene, he's been good as well. The only reason that they haven't found more success even, and they aren't in that top 3 in their own division, is because they're leading the league in penalty minutes. These guys can't stay out of the penalty box. Their goalie, right, Juice Saros, I hope I'm saying that right, 1/4 of his goals come on power play. So when they're getting their guys to the box, they're really, really hurting their team, letting their goalie down by a ton. Power plays and going to the penalty box leads to more goals, which in turn leads to more, worse games, as we know, a lot more losses. So, yeah, I think the Nashville Predators, if they find a way to clean up these things, which clearly it just seems to be a discipline issue, if they clean up these discipline issues, they could be a real serious contender come playoff time. I think they can really do it.
Absolutely. And I think you're right when we're talking about true sleepers. The Capitals, I wouldn't really consider them as much of a sleeper. I think they're more in still the conversation. So on this, the true sleeper, going to give it to Connor.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Moving forward, the next topic we have, the Pelicans, the Blazers. Who won the CJ McCollum trade? Connor, starting with you on this one.
Yeah, I think it's kind of tough to say, but I think I'm definitely going to side with the Pelicans here. They have CJ McCollum, and they have him for a couple years. His contract isn't up for another, I think, like 2 or 3 years at this point. So that's good for them. They're going to have him around for quite a little while. And they also have some pieces in play. Brandon Ingram comes to mind, Valanciunas. We don't know what the situation is with Zion Williamson. I know you and Nick just talked about that just recently about what's going on with him. I know that's kind of up in the air. But if they could have Ingram, Valanciunas, Zion, and now CJ McCollum on the floor all at once and all playing their best brand of basketball that everyone thinks that they can play, I think they could do really, really well. Also, you have to look at McCollum's stats so far this season. He's got over 21 points per game, and he's shooting 40% from three, which is pretty good. Not to mention, the Pelicans also got guys like Larry Nance in that trade. So I think they definitely won that trade. Yes, they had to give up some first-round picks, and they had to send some people to the Blazers, but I feel like on the Blazers side of things that the Blazers didn't really get some great pieces. What are they going to do with the pieces that they got? You know what I mean? Those first-round picks, the second-round picks, we don't know if they're going to pan out. With the NBA draft, you never know who's going to be able to pan out there. It's a very big toss-up. So I think that the Pelicans got a really good player in CJ McCollum. Larry Nance can do the job here and there when he needs to. And overall, I just think the Pelicans got the better end of this trade.
All right. Interesting. Derek, your response.
I got to go with the Blazers. First of all, Damian Lillard's been hurt, so CJ McCollum would be with the Blazers by himself. And right now you're kind of in a transition mode. Damian Lillard's starting to get older, 31 years old. There was talk maybe they trade him. And right now you trade McCollum, which personally I think is a smart move. You get rid of him, you add some assets, you get first-round picks, and a sleeper name in that trade is Josh Hart. Josh Hart, I get it. He's been with the Los Angeles Lakers. He was a solid shooting guard. They traded him so they could get a big player to the Pelicans. They got Anthony Davis in that trade, and then you trade him over to the Blazers in this trade. The thing with him is he's never gotten enough minutes. He can shoot the three-point shot well. He can shoot. There's no doubt about it. He's not as great as McCollum, but when you got Damian Lillard has the ball in his hands. When you combine Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, it's a little iffy because both of those guys need the basketball, and Damian Lillard is an excellent passer, but the problem is CJ McCollum is not the guy who's going to just shoot the three. He's going to drive to the basket, try to get easy buckets, and I think, honestly, they're in a transition mode. So with this said, they needed some assets. Damian Lillard was unhappy at times. There was a miscommunication between him and McCollum. So who knows if that was an issue or what was going on there. But you get Josh Hart. You get some first-round picks. You regroup that. If Lillard wants to stay, okay, then you trade some of those assets you got and you get a big name, maybe try to sign someone in free agency. Who knows? Get something that Lillard wants. Or if Lillard wants to leave, which personally I think that might happen. I get it, he's loyal, but he wants to win. He's 31, 32 years old. He's starting to get older. He cares about winning championships, not just sitting on a team making so many millions of dollars. He's going to want to win now. You trade Lillard, and then you got assets. You got all these young pieces. And with that trade of McCollum, you got so many young pieces. You get those first-round picks. You add those pieces in that McCollum deal. It's an easier transition if they trade Lillard and get that moving, or Lillard leave, or Lillard stays, and you just recruit those assets and you just get the players that fit Lillard. Because what the Blazers are doing right now is they're looking, Lillard is their guy. Right now, he is their guy. You need to recruit pieces that are going to be around him, not guys that are supplementary. You got to have guys that are going to be able to work off of him, be off ball. CJ McCollum is not that great off ball. He's a great player, don't get me wrong, but off ball, he's not there. And I think you get the assets that Lillard wants, and I think that the Blazers are in the right spot with getting some young assets, getting the athleticism that they need in that roster, and I think that's a huge piece of this trade, adding athleticism to the Blazers roster.
All right. I think both sides provide some fair points. I think McCollum is a great talent. He's going to do some great things with whatever team he is on. I think that the Blazers are in a good spot now as well. But on this one, I have to give it to Derek. Tied up at 1-1 here. Going into the final topic of conversation. MLB. The lockout. Still seems a little far from coming to an end. But if and when that lockout does end, who's making the biggest splash? Connor, start us off.
Yeah, okay, so I'd like to preface this first by saying we kind of went into the process of figuring out this argument. Me and Derek kind of agreed before the show that we both weren't going to talk about the New York Yankees. We're both big Yankee fans, so that was going to be a little too biased. So just for all you know, I think the Yankees might eventually make the biggest splash, but that's not the conversation right now. I want to ask you people at home, who do you think is the most disappointing team from last season? Who was the biggest letdown, really? Yeah, some of you might say the Yankees, right? That could be up there. You know, a lot of people expected them to go a lot farther. Maybe it was the Rays because they didn't make the World Series again. I'm going to say it was the San Diego Padres, though. A lot of people thought that team was going to go far. Big star like Fernando Tatis, Manny Machado. That team looked like it was ready to take the next step, especially considering they got Blake Snell in that pitching rotation. That team looked ready to go. But for some reason, they just couldn't string those wins together. They couldn't really win any games come down the stretch. You had Machado fighting in the dugout with Fernando Tatis. The team was just an absolute mess, right? They need to make a big move this offseason if they want to bounce back and become a serious World Series contender this upcoming season, especially when considering they're sharing a division with, you know, the LA Dodgers and the San Francisco Giants. Like, you've got great teams in there. You just can't sit on the sideline and say, hey, we're going to get them next year. No, you got to make a move. That's the most important thing. And I think one of the biggest pieces that is going to get moved this offseason is Matt Olson, and I think he's going to become a San Diego Padre. They can trade away a couple pieces, including Eric Hosmer, let the A's replace their first baseman, bring Matt Olson in. That's an explosive bat. And imagine that infield now. You have Jake Cronenworth, you have Fernando Tatis, Manny Machado, and Matt Olson in that infield. They have plenty of pieces that they can trade away. They can trade away Hoi-Sung Kim, their backup on the infield. He's a really good player that can potentially develop over there for the A's. I think Matt Olson is the perfect guy to be moved to the Padres. Even if they don't get rid of Hosmer, right? That's fine, because now the National League has a DH. You can have Hosmer in that DH spot, or I think potentially even you can bring in Matt Olson, and the Padres could even go out and get a guy like Mike Conforto, have him play in the outfield, or again, have him in that DH position now that the National League has one. So yeah, I think Padres are going to be the team to make a big splash. They have to come back after the very big, much of a letdown that they had last season. So yeah, I'm going to say all the way that it's the Padres going out and grabbing Matt Olson, and maybe even Mike Conforto if they feel like it.
Absolutely, and I'm going to agree too. I truly think it's the Yankees as well, but for the purposes of the show.
The argument. In all fairness.
In all fairness, yes, right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Derek, throwing it over to you.
This is a team that people don't think of, but after a disappointing season, they fired their manager. I'm going with the St. Louis Cardinals. All right, hear me out. First of all, you got Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. They're at their primes. You got to win now. You got Jack Flaherty as your ace. Number one is they were going after Max Scherzer before Max Scherzer got signed by the New York Mets. So they're going to look for that co-ace, that two-starter for the St. Louis Cardinals. Yadier Molina, who's getting older, he might fit that DH role. If you get a catcher, maybe they make a trade, maybe Wilson Contreras. I mean, it's a little risky, but there's other catchers out there that you can definitely go out there. You got Tommy Edman, who can play all over the field. You got second base or outfield. You might want to look to get a second baseman. That's a spot where there's not a lot of great second basemen on the market, but you can make a move and get a trade there. Paul DeJong, who's their shortstop right now, they've been very disappointed in Paul DeJong, and I think they're going to get Trevor Story. Trevor Story fits perfectly for the St. Louis Cardinals. He's a bat. With the thing that the Cardinals lack right now, they had up and down defense, offense. It was like a little going back and forth, which was worse. And what Trevor Story does is he's a steady shortstop. He will get you he will bat 250. He will play solid defense. He's not going to play exceptional defense, but he'll be very consistent. Paul DeJong will bat 100 and maybe have good defense, maybe have terrible defense. You fill that role, and then you look at the outfield. A lot of young talent. You got Dylan Carlson, Tyler O'Neill, but you need that guy. You need an outfielder who's going to be a stud, who's going to be out there every single day. These young guys are still getting used to the MLB, just getting up there. They could get maybe a Conforto. Maybe they make a big move. Maybe you do a double, maybe you make a big move. Obviously, like I said, they need a pitcher. You get Chris Bassett. Maybe the A's are going to trade one of the outfielders. There's so many moves and flexibility that the Cardinals have. They have a top prospect in Nolan Gorman, who's a first base, third baseman. I think they'll trade him because you're talking about having Goldschmidt, Arenado. There's really no place for him in that scenario. I think you trade him, get an outfielder, get a starting pitcher. There's so many moves that the Cardinals can do, and I think when you're looking at the primes of Goldschmidt and Arenado, you got to do something. The Cardinals fan base is probably livid because they haven't been to the playoffs in a while. They've had so many disappointing seasons. They're ready to win. They're the second best in World Series championships behind the Yankees at winning. They're frustrated. That's a baseball town. I've been there before. Busch Stadium, it's electric in the postseason. It's a great atmosphere, and they want to win. They got Goldschmidt, Arenado for a reason. They're ready to win. You got to get pitching. You got to get Trevor Story, get some outfield help, and I think they will do it, especially with the new rules in place, like you guys mentioned, the DH. The DH is going to be huge, and I think they're going to make a big move. I think it's going to be multiple moves. It's going to be multiple moving pieces. And it's not just going to be, okay, we're trying to trade a prospect. Paul DeJong might be on the move. You're talking about other scenarios of young outfielders going out, trading for a bigger outfielder. And I think the St. Louis Cardinals will go out there once the lockout is done, make some moves, booster that roster, and maybe try to make some things happen next when we come to the MLB baseball season.
In any offseason, there's always a whole lot of ifs and maybes leading up to what's going to happen. And especially now in baseball, there's so many ifs and maybes. But I think there's too many ifs and maybes for the Cardinals. I think for the Padres, if they get Matt Olson, that's an immediate splash for that team. That becomes an immediate win ready. That's one guy. That's one piece. There's too many needs for the Cardinals. They can't make it all happen. So with that, I got to give it to Connor. Connor, how you feeling?
I feel absolutely incredible. Listen, Derek, you did a fantastic job. I'm gonna be a fair winner here. Derek, you did a fantastic job. You're talking a lot of trash before the game started. You know, we were texting beforehand. I was trying to be cordial, saying, you know, don't count yourself out because you said you thought you were gonna lose. Don't count yourself out. Okay. Then you come in here and you start with the big ego, the big persona. Listen, we shut it down. We're bringing another W home, continually staying undefeated here. I hope I can retire undefeated. For those of you who don't know, I am graduating this upcoming semester, so I'm going to be retired, and I'm hoping to stay undefeated. We're going to have a lot more. I'd like to be on here a couple more times and go against a couple more of the big names here in the studio. But we'll see what happens. So grateful for this win. So grateful to take Derek down after he was flashing some arrogance before the matchup here. So, yeah, great win.
Derek, of all people to lose to, are you happy for it to be Connor, and do you have any outgoing words?
This is what I'd say. I deserved it. I was definitely a little cocky. I definitely deserved it. But the one thing is, I'm glad it's Connor, because we can agree on that we're both Yankee fans and we both agreed on certain topics. It wasn't like, hey, I'm going to do this, you're going to do that. It was very cordial, and he's a senior, and honestly, as a freshman, going up against a senior, it's big time. It's big time. You gotta step up that game, and I gotta be ready next couple times. And hey, that winning percentage goes down, but I still got a couple wins to my advantage, and I'll just keep working at it, keep working all day, every day, 24/7. Get my sports ready, and I'll be ready. I'll be ready.
Think the people in the studio were preying on your downfall?
Oh, they definitely were. They definitely were, and it's irritating, but guess what? I'll be ready. I beat some of those guys. So I still got that swagger. But I'll be back. I'll be ready to compete. I'll be ready, better than ever.
What a great segment here on Prove Your Point. Coming up next, we have a very special, very exciting segment. Connor and I were fortunate enough to interview Freddie Coleman of Freddie and Fitzsimmons on ESPN Radio. He's a professor here now at Marist, teaching a class with us. Did a wonderful interview. Coming up next. Stay tuned. Joining us now here on the show is co-host of Freddie and Fitzsimmons and now Marist professor, Freddie Coleman. Freddie, it is an honor to have you on our show with us here today. We're going to get right into it. I think I speak for Connor and myself when I say we have absolutely adored your class so far, 5 weeks in.
Appreciate that.
It has been a wonderful experience, but we want to know, what has the experience been like for you as a professor?
Robert and Con has been a godsend because I knew that I was going to have a lot of fun because you have a chance to share your expertise and share the knowledge that I've been able to accumulate in so many years in radio from that standpoint doing TV. But I knew I was going to get something out of it as well. And just the creativity that everybody has on different levels. It's really been an enjoyable time because I know that people are going to learn from me, but I've learned as much from you gentlemen and ladies in this class. So it's been not just a great experience, it's been a great time. I look forward to coming here each and every Tuesday and Thursday.
Absolutely.
Now, before you came to Marist, obviously you've had years of experience with ESPN. Tell me a little bit about how you got there, and then what has that career been like for you, that path that you've been on?
It's interesting you asked that, Connor, because my general manager at the time, Bruce Gilbert, he heard me when he was driving through Albany when I was working in Albany, New York, when I was doing a sports talk show Monday through Friday for the Fox affiliate in the Capital District. And he didn't realize that Jason Barrett, who at that time was the producer of Game Night, because they had an opening of Game Night, he didn't know Jason Barrett and I had known each other from our days working here in the Hudson Valley. So he said, yeah, I heard this guy, Freddie Coleman, the other day. And Jason almost gave himself whiplash saying, well, you heard who? And he said, I think he'd be good for Game Night as an opening. And Jason raised his hand and said, I got his number. So he called me, I had a chance to audition. I tell people all the time, you never know who's listening. And when an opportunity comes that somebody was paying attention, you don't run away from that opportunity, you run towards that opportunity. Because I just got into Albany a couple of months prior. And my first thought was, man, I just got here, haven't got settled yet. But I said, I'm not going to pass up a chance to audition for ESPN Radio. That would be completely asinine to pass that opportunity. So in a nutshell, somebody heard me, liked what they heard. I brought in for an audition, and almost 18 years later, I'm still at ESPN Radio.
That's amazing. Now, for people like Connor, myself, and some of our viewers, as well as our colleagues here at Marist, what is your best piece of advice for us as we're getting ready to get out into preparing our careers and get ready for something like that? It's a competitive industry, big scary world. What's your best advice for us to get ready for that?
Well, number one, I use the 2 F's in situations like this. Have faith in yourself, because it's very easy to talk yourself out of an opportunity or going for something than it is to say, I'm going to go for it and not even worry about it. I think too many people, not just young people like you guys, but even people my generation, they always want to err on the side of caution instead of just taking a step of faith, taking a leap of faith and trusting your ability. And if it doesn't work out, at least you gave yourself an opportunity to put yourself in that space to try to make it work. And it's okay to be fearless. It's okay to say to yourself, okay, I'm not going to be defeated today. Or that person may think they're better than me, but I know that I'm as good as they are. And go in there and just give it everything you have, but never take a step back. Even when people try to throw walls in front of you, to have you take a step back, you find a way to either knock down that wall, or take a pebble out of that wall, and make sure you're able to scale that wall to the best of your ability. You have the talent, you have the know-how, but be fearless, be a little bit more fearless, and definitely have a lot more faith in yourself, and you'd be amazed how far that can take you.
Yeah, no doubt. That's something you always talk about in class. And something else you always talk about in class is some of the moments you've had on ESPN over the years. So for the people at home watching, can you tell them maybe some of your favorite memories that you've had at ESPN, maybe one of the most entertaining memories that comes to mind for you?
It's funny you tell me, you asked that, Connor, because I was just talking about this with a friend of mine, Jonathan Coachman. We did Coach and Coleman together on the weekends many moons ago. And we had Shaquille O'Neal on the show. And I'm thinking, okay, how do you approach a Shaquille O'Neal who you know is going to be very entertaining, he's going to be very knowledgeable and everything. Of course, he was pushing a product, but we didn't care. We got Shaq, that's all we didn't care about. And we wanted to do in 2 segments. We had so much fun. He had so much fun with us. And even his handler, one of his publicist team said, man, Shaq is so much fun. He said he could have stayed there an hour, he would have. And I knew it wasn't BS. I knew that was exactly how I felt because we had that kind of vibe with him. So that was pretty cool. And one of my more fun interviews I've ever done, where Ice Cube comes into the studio, and he was just starting the Big 3 basketball league. So we have him in the studio. And the first question I threw at him, I said, Snoop Dogg said that if it wasn't for you being in NWA, there wouldn't be a Snoop Dogg. He goes, and I said, how do you feel about that? He goes, when did he say that? I said, he said in a magazine article that I read. And I said, man, that's pretty cool that he thinks that much of you. He had no idea that Snoop felt that way about him. Wow. He said, we've been boys for years, but I had no idea that's how he felt about me. And then after the interview, I showed him the article, and he looked at the article and looked at his wife and said, man, you think you know people, but that's always been my boy, but that's not even more my boy after seeing something like that. So in a career that I've been able to carve out at ESPN Radio, having those kind of personality, I don't want to say not conflicts, but having those kind of personality, rising up with Shaquille O'Neal and Ice Cube, I'll never forget that as long as I live.
That's incredible.
Now, you have a partner on your show. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to work to have that relationship with your partner, both inside of the professional workspace as well as outside of it?
I'm a big believer that you have to like who you work with, and you don't have to like them all the time. But I can't imagine walking into a studio or doing a show with Ian and we're butting heads constantly, because that's not going to make a good show. Then things really get too personal, then things get too out of hand. So we've been able to challenge each other. But if anything, it's strengthened our friendship, because we never have to worry about where each other stands. And on any given time, I'll have something to say and Ian will be surprised by it, and vice versa. But that's part of the tapestry that we've been able to create, because it's okay to be singular and plural at the same time, where you can be yourself but also include somebody else, and making sure you guys understand it's okay to have your opinion. I'm going to have mine, and we'll meet somewhere in the middle, whether we agree or disagree. Those kind of things always work. And when you have that kind of relationship outside of the studio, outside of the radio show that we have, to me it makes the show even better, because even though you know your partner, you just never know something's going to come out that'll blow your hair back and say, oh wow, I didn't realize that. So that's what we always work on that, and we try to organize spontaneity, and we've gotten pretty good at what we've been able to do.
Amazing.
Yeah, after years together, I would imagine. Freddie, we talked to you a lot today about your time at ESPN and your time at Marist, but I think it would be a crime if we didn't ask you some sports-related stuff
Sure.
of our own. So
Sure.
I want to ask you what you thought of that Super Bowl the other night, and what is your way too early prediction for next year's Super Bowl champion?
Well, the NFL keeps winning, because how many times have we heard that the NFL is supposed to be on a downward spiral, they're going to be on a downward flight? Well, the last couple of years, especially this year. And think about the last 3 weekends that we've seen in the NFL. All 4 of those games in the divisional playoffs, then Championship Sunday. And then you get a game like that where you had 2 teams that people wonder, okay, what kind of Super Bowl were we going to see, with the underdog Cincinnati Bengals and the Rams being all in with their Guardians of the Galaxy, all the people that they brought in. And then you get a game going down to the final 90 seconds, and then the best player in football, Aaron Donald, making a play to finally get a championship ring. I knew the game was going to be good, but the subplots throughout the whole game made it even better, number one. And number two, maybe it's too early to do this, but I can't wait to see what the Kansas City Chiefs are going to do, because now you got to think about another team in the AFC, an AFC that right now is more loaded than the NFC. I know it's going to be a lot harder for either one of these teams to get back next year, but it's going to be a lot harder for Cincinnati because of the quarterbacks that are in the AFC, and the Rams don't have to deal with as many potential minefields that Cincinnati's going to have to deal with, especially in the own division. We got Cleveland, Pittsburgh, whatever they're going to do, and you can't forget about a Baltimore Ravens team that before they got hurt, they had the best record in the AFC after the first 10 weeks of the season.
Absolutely. Now kind of transition to basketball a little bit. You know, we know you're a big NBA fan. Who do you think right now is the best team in basketball?
It's the Phoenix Suns, because what they've been able to do, because I'm sure it can't be easy when you're getting everybody's best shot, and time after time, they're able to win any kind of style. You want to play up and down, they'll get up and down the court. You want to play a knockdown, drag out, Pier 6 brawl kind of style, they've been able to do that. And I love what Chris Paul has continued to do, where he's the Benjamin Button of the NBA. He keeps retreating and getting younger and younger. But Devin Booker has made that step of being the guy. DeAndre Ayton has been really, really good expanding his game. And their bench has been terrific. And Monty Williams continues to show people that he can deploy people and make that work for his basketball team, that even if a guy's having a subpar night, there have been more than enough guys that have been able to step up and make that work. So Phoenix is the best team right now in the NBA. A sneaky team is the Miami Heat. They got a bunch of shooters. They got a leader in Jimmy Butler. We know what Eric Spoelstra can do as a head coach, especially in playoff situations. And now they have that confidence to say, hey, what happened last year, that was an aberration. We know what kind of team we are. You're going to have to deal with us, and we're going to impose our will on you. So that's a sneaky team that a lot of people aren't talking about, that don't be surprised the Miami Heat wind away back into the NBA Finals for the second time in 3 years.
Especially if they get Oladipo back by the end of the season.
Yeah, from a leadership standpoint, defensive standpoint, but also when you can be very varied, and Miami can do that because Bam Adebayo coming back, he's been a little bit more of an inside guy, not just a stretch move around 5. He's shown a little bit of a post-up game. And with those snipers of Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero coming off the bench, now you got something in Miami that you can play inside basketball and outside basketball and marry those two together and make it work.
Absolutely. And back to Phoenix. No one's talking about the fact that they're, 42 and 10 right now?
Yeah, the best record in the NBA.
And no one's talking about it.
Well, you know why? Because we're all talking about the Lakers, their struggles, what's going to happen between the Brooklyn Nets and also the Sixers making that trade. Golden State with Klay Thompson being back, even though defensively they've been awful the last week and a half. I mean, the Clippers ran up and down on them without Kawhi Leonard and without Paul George last night. So that's an issue that Steve Kerr addressed as a head coach. And the West is so loaded. You got Ja Morant of Memphis. So the other storylines that are out there that we're really not talking about team in Phoenix having the best record in the NBA, mainly because they were there last year, and a lot of people wondering, can they get there again?
Well, Freddie, it's been an absolute honor to have you on the show. Thank you again so much
Yeah.
for being here. Now we're going to throw it over to our next segment. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to another segment of the Red Fox Report. February is an exciting time on campus for Marist right now, as our men's and women's basketball teams are both closing out their seasons, getting ready for conference play, and spring sports are also getting underway on campus. As for basketball, the Marist men's team has won 5 games in a row, with their most recent victory coming this past Sunday against Quinnipiac, winning by just 1 point. This recent win streak has catapulted the Red Foxes to 5th in the MAC, with their final home game taking place this Friday against Manhattan. One thing I will say about their current win streak is that this is a team that has had their ups and downs throughout the season. They've played a lot of close games, but finally rattling off a few wins in the row is great because they're playing their best basketball at the perfect time as they get ready for the conference tournament down in Atlantic City. The women's team, on the other hand, has not had the same recent luck, losing 7 of their last 9 games and currently sitting second to last in the MAC standings. The Red Foxes close out their season with 3 more games, 2 of which will be played in the McCann Arena here at Marist. It will be close to determine whether or not this women's team has what it takes to potentially get into a position where they can compete in the conference tournament and make a run in the said conference tournament. As for spring sports, their seasons have also begun with men's and women's lacrosse, softball, and baseball all getting underway. The most notable result so far was the men's baseball team sweeping Norfolk State on the road this past weekend. For any more information about Marist athletics, be sure to check out Centerfield for all the latest information and updates.